It is such an exciting day today because we have the honor of chatting with Alexis Dornier. Alexis is a multidisciplinary architect born in Germany and moved to Bali in 2013. But prior to this, he studied architecture at the Berlin University of the Arts and worked as an architectural designer for Asymptote Architecture, OMA New York, and Rex between 2004 and 2007. With this glaring resume, he then established a holistic architecture and design studio of his own in Ubud, Bali, with a rapidly growing body of work, not just across the Balinese landscape, but also across the world. He's worked with numerous local and international clients on a mixture of residential and commercial projects, and hence has proven to accommodate the different needs and challenges throughout time. Alexis tackles each task in its own matter, problem, and affair, making him constantly formulate new approaches, new forms of expression, new solutions, and also new breakthroughs. So thank you so much, Alexis, for your time to share today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are super excited to hear from the perspective of someone who has lived and practiced all over the world. So maybe we can start with the fact that you grew up in Germany and worked in the States for numerous years practicing architecture there. But what triggered you to move to Indonesia?
It was actually like coincidence. I was wanting to help a friend of mine on an architectural project. He wanted to build
Hmm.
his vacation getaway, and I had worked for my design studio in Berlin, and this came up, and I never really thought about like leaving Berlin at the time because it was such a vibrant spot and creative hub, like it is
Right.
still. But I just took the opportunity to find out something or a new place that I hadn't had on the map, and so I kind of fell in love with the country and its people and the way that everything looks and feels and smells here. So I yeah decided to stay here, and then little by little, other people started asking for help and uh, on the architectural realm. So yeah, and then everything developed from there on, and I decided on shifting my studio completely from Berlin to Bali.
How did that change your architectural practice over time?
I mean, I think architecture is a lot about organizing, constraints and facts and events around the task. And it
Hmm.
doesn't really matter where you are. It's just more about like how you tackle and how you organize your architectural design process. So it was for me, not so much of a difference um, working here,
Hmm.
as the design process very sort of structured in a classical sense, and so I wasn't really so much sort of influenced by something new, but actually, of course, the tropical environment dictates like a very specific sort of language and a very specific physics on physical demand on architecture. So that's why, yeah, like just the major part of our body of work is in a tropical environment. So, but I'm very keen, of course, to apply what we have learned to other climates, countries,
Hmm.
environments, and so yes, so that was on the sort of exterior uh, impacts of this land, and then
Right.
but then on the cultural end, I really I was greatly influenced by the people of Bali and Indonesia, and just like the common perception on work and planning, and as architecture is a lot about planning and simulation, there's a
Hmm.
very different perception and different mindset on these two phenomena. So sometimes these clash, sometimes these create challenges. We have to manage our expectations on site when constructing buildings, working with contractors. It's different languages. I feel that these challenges were great to find a really good basis between kind of being open to improvisation, alterations, adaptability, at the same time pursue a strong plan or a concept in each of the projects. So there is a lot of wiggle room that needs to be in order for a project to succeed, both on the actual outcome or the actual building, but also on how to work with each other as teams, between contractors and between clients. So there needs to be a high level of flexibility. I feel the ability to adapt and improvise is something that you can do here much better, at least in the scale that we're mostly operating in. And that was very refreshing on the one hand, but then also very challenging on the other hand, because people expect stuff and there's slight deviations and changes that as a group we decide to take on. And it's a very fluid process in general, and that can be very challenging for people at times, including myself.
So most of the cultural reference is in the communication, right, between the different teams, different collaborators, and also the way they communicate their needs and wants, I guess, like you said, the wiggle room and the flexibility, right, as it is sort of different terrain you're working with right now.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, architecture is really probably one of the most complicated things you can do, because you have ideas and everybody depicts ideas differently. Everyone shapes their own reality. So even if we're seemingly talking about the same thing, it's like in any relationship, it might not be the same thing. It might be similar, might be like closer to similar and further away to similar. So a lot of communication is required, and also a lot of giving in is required. So the office culture has developed in a sense that we take everyone in the team like very, very seriously, and everyone can contribute, including the clients, and that is something that sort of shaped this office culture into, instead of working for people, we work with people, and instead of contractors working for us, we are working with them, and we're together finding solutions for things. And it may not be the most conventional way of doing schematic design development, construction drawings. Then we start the design, the construction process. So there are many ways of shaping your design and building process, and many people improvise while they're building, and of course that can result in great and amazing outcomes, but that also requires a certain openness for all parties involved.
No, I so agree actually that there are no boundaries in architecture, because 1 second you might be designing a space, but that's very same second you are actually also designing rhythm, you're also designing experiences, memories. So it can crawl to a lot of different things. But is there anything in the tropical setting that sort of helps your sustainability efforts toward architecture?
Well, sustainability is a big word, right? And we're far from being able to call ourselves sustainable architects or architectural design practice. But what we have an impact on is how big are the footprints? How do we negotiate with clients that have expectations? How can we remind them that whatever they do out of whatever material, it has an impact? And the less they do, the kind of better it is, because the less resources are required to use. So whether that be money, material, and out of out of the material category, you can say, okay, you use this material, you'll have less carbon footprint than if you use this. So it's actually engaging with the client and helping them to be aware of certain decisions that they are taking when they're pursuing their, is it their dream house or their business vessel, however that may look like. So I feel a lot is about communication, and if you use a little bit less of something, that might be the first step of being more conscious and aware of how to spend resources available. And then, of course, if you use fast-growing resources like bamboo, you have probably the lowest footprint ever, but then that often clashes with the sort of Western or perception on luxury and comfort that most people are trying to get when they're asking for architecture. So it's always a negotiation, and that's the fun part, right? There is no best case scenario other than everyone doing their part and being open to having things a little bit more compact, and spending a little bit more money possibly on reclaimed timber as opposed to like fresh cut timber, and that is really something that we're trying to do in the project, at least work to a great extent, with reclaimed or found wood that has been around and in use for longer.
I see that a lot of it is in educating the client, yeah, especially when most of the time, maybe a lot of people don't realize this, but clients don't really know what they need or what they want at the core. So maybe they would say that I want a lot of wood in the house, but really what they want is warmth. So it is true that when you communicate well with your clients or with your team members, you sort of help them realize what they need, really. Then there will be this middle ground. From your experience, how do you sort of come to this middle ground, or how do you find the balance between what the client wants and the more sustainable approach, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's about negotiating also, what I want to contribute as an artist, loving architecture, and I have my own ideas about space and things like that. So I'm negotiating between the part in me that wants this, and then another from an entrepreneurial side. You want a fast and efficient process on synchronizing with the client in order to generate an outcome that they can identify with, that they like, and then can be streamlined and then pushed to the launching pad, right? So I feel it's just like everything's a negotiation. You negotiate numerous times. I don't know how many hundreds of times per day, and if you do that either consciously or unconsciously, and it's a practice, and it's my personal interest to be more and more aware of what I'm doing and how I do things. So it's not only about educating the client, but also remaining in a headspace where you can keep learning and also be inspired by the client. And because especially us as architects, we think at times, we're stigmatized with having to know it all, and that probably closes more our realm and our space, as opposed to really being open, trying to understand, where a person is coming from, and also where the different motivations inside of us as designers are coming from. And every day they change, right? So they have, everything's in flux, and it's just about can we practice a design process that is open to new things and new ideas and to other people, and to really focus on the best result and the most interesting and exciting result possible, as opposed to just pushing through our own agenda.
Yes, as we come to an understanding right before that, architecture is endless. There are no boundaries to it, and I think this is sort of good and bad. And the bad thing only about it is that it can sometimes be confusing when it practiced because you don't know where to draw the line. But the amazing thing about it is that it can be so large to then solve many larger problems as well. So perhaps social, cultural problems. Is this how you see architecture moving forward?
I think the nature of the architectural training is one that you constitute and you cultivate your mind to be able to tap into many things. You start to put yourself in other people's perspective, in other people's heads, and I feel this is a craft that that is very beneficial to understanding systems and understanding events and being able to objectively name, describe, and organize your surrounding or a specific task or challenge or problem that is very beneficial for all sorts of levels on of intervention. It doesn't need to be only purely architectural. It can be entrepreneurial. It can be social, as you were saying. There's just some playful juggling with constraints and that can be turned into opportunities if organized right for a very precise agenda. So it's fueled by an agenda, by a personal attitude, that you're able to explain and broadcast. And I think, if you would derive architectural, the essence of the architectural profession into other disciplines, I think that will be very, very beneficial to the other disciplines and vice versa, right? Like when you're coming from the world of music into architecture, architecture could greatly benefit from that. And we had an amazing project with an artist, a classical composer, who accessed the architectural vocabulary like in such a new, a different way, and that was just very exciting what he could bring to the table. Just coming from music and understanding flow and understanding rhythm and the story that we can tell with whatever it is that we're doing with music and architecture or social professions or entrepreneurial angles on things. So I feel that this is why architecture is so amazing, because you can transpose your knowledge into other disciplines and vice versa if you're open.
Yeah, no, that's why they say it's important to have design thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is sometimes overlooked, yeah, I think, as architects begin to develop their aesthetic goals instead of really taking the time to understand the client, understand the needs, and understand the problem. And it is only when you treat each project differently in its own scope, its own needs, and its own problems that you will get the most out of the result and you find the most fascinating solutions out of it.
Right. Correct. I feel that if there's anything that we are very interested in, is that we're not trying to push, or I'm not trying to push like a brand in terms of form and shape. What I'm more in is remaining agile and adaptive enough to constantly change both method and outcome of an architectural process. Like, so you change, as individuals are all different, you change yourself, and that requires that you remain very flexible also with what you depict as your oeuvre, or like your, say, body of work. It can be very constraining. Let's say Zaha Hadid architects, for example, they can, I feel they can only do Zaha Hadid architecture. So it's very hard, but I feel we could do that, and but we could do Otto or Jorn Utzon or like whoever it is, like, because we have the liberty and the freedom to choose together with all the partners and the team and the budget available and the location and the expression and the symbol and the icon of what the architecture can become. Then we can choose from all this, what all these people have done before, and they've worked so hard and really crystallizing their own language and their own agenda. But then if I think of Mies van der Rohe or Frank Lloyd Wright, it seemed like almost so limited in their way. Yes, representing their time and their agenda, but if we could become and be all these people and do a mix of all these people depending on what is most suitable for the task, then I think we achieve a lot of freedom in the work that we do.
So you see architecture as a process rather than, I wouldn't say it's not a profession, but maybe it's not a fixed title, right? Architecture is not a fixed title. Instead, it is a process of learning, negotiating.
It is definitely the same sort of phenomenon of change that is represented in architecture. Although we think, if we look at a building, it's very static, and traditionally takes a long time to build. It's very sort of, it's not like tech or an application that you can just write over, a course of a few weeks and then it's done. It's something that takes time, but even there, you see how everything just gets overformed and changing and experimentation and two steps to the front, forward, one step back. There's always movement, right? I think about architecture differently every day, and I probably think about it differently after our conversation. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. And and I don't want to waste time trying to, find my way, because there is not my way. There's just something like this ongoing stream of what is just happening all the time. So being aware of that makes one less anxious about having to protect something. You just like open and remain open and listen to people, and which is harder than one might think.
That's amazing. I think all this really changed our view towards practicing architecture and obviously the scope of what it can do. Yeah, so thank you so much, Alexis, for this.
Thank you, Karina.